Elias Ward lived a quiet life on a small piece of land far from any town. People often said he was too soft-hearted for the hard land he lived on, but Elias never argued. He was not a rich man, and his ranch was nothing more than a small cabin, a few cattle and an old horse that had carried him through many summers and winters. Still, he respected every person he met and believed that kindness could travel farther than fear. The desert around his ranch could be beautiful when the sun rose, painting the sand gold and orange. But by noon, the heat felt sharp enough to dry a man's lips in minutes. Elias had learned to carry extra water everywhere. The land taught him that no one survived alone in the desert, not even strong men with guns or proud riders with fast horses. The desert cared for no one but punished everyone equally. In those days, tension ran quietly under every breath. Settlers feared that Apache families were growing restless. Some ranchers claimed that a war was coming. Others said it had already started in small ways. A missing cow here, a broken fence there, a distant shout in the night. But Elias had never seen the Apache as enemies. He only saw people trying to live, just like everyone else on the land. One afternoon, the heat was heavier than usual. Even the insects seemed tired. Elias rode slowly with a sack of flour tied to his saddle and a small bundle of herbs the trader had given him. His horse walked with steady steps, stopping sometimes to sniff the ground for shade. Elias let him rest now and then, knowing the long road back home could be tough. As he reached a stretch of land where dry bushes stood like abandoned bones, he noticed something strange. A thin cloud of dust moved across the flat desert floor. It was far away, barely visible, but it didn't look like dust blown by the wind. It moved too slowly. Elias narrowed his eyes, wiped the sweat off his forehead, and guided his horse closer. After a few minutes, the shapes became clearer. They were not horses. They were people, two women, walking unsteadily as if each step cost them too much effort. They carried old blankets and small bundles, and even from a distance, he could see their shoulders bent with exhaustion. Elias felt his heart beat slow. These were Apache women. His first instinct was not fear, but worry. No one walked the desert at this hour unless they were forced to. The sun was too strong, the land was too unforgiving. He gently clicked his tongue, urging his horse forward. When he came near enough, the women stopped and watched him. One was older, with deep lines on her face from years of wind and sun. The younger one looked barely in her mid-20s. Their clothes were dusty, and their feet seemed bruised from the long walk. Elias stopped several feet away, not wanting to frighten them. Slowly, he stepped off his horse. He lifted both hands a little to show he meant no harm. His voice was soft when he spoke, because he knew the desert carried every sound like a secret trying to escape. "You look tired," he said gently. "I have water. If you need some, it's yours." The women didn't move. The desert wind brushed across the space between them, carrying heat and silence. The younger woman glanced at the older one, who gave a slow, cautious nod. Elias opened his water pouch and held it out, not walking closer unless invited. The younger woman stepped forward. Her steps were slow, careful. She reached out, took the pouch, and drank only a little, as if she didn't want to take too much. Then she handed it back and placed her hand over her chest in gratitude. The older woman gave him a long, searching look, one that seemed to study the truth inside him. Elias smiled kindly. "There's more," he said. He reached for the second canteen tied to his saddle and placed it on a rock between them. He didn't push it toward them. He let them decide. The younger woman picked it up and drank again, this time a bit more. Elias noticed her hands shaking lightly, not from fear, but from weakness. He gently asked, "How far have you walked?" The older woman lifted her hand and pointed toward the distant hills, Apache territory. It was far. Too far to cross without enough water. Elias understood they had been on the move for hours, maybe even since the night before. He looked around. The closest shade was a large rock formation a few yards away. Without asking too many questions, he walked toward it, motioning with his hand for them to follow. He spoke softly. "Come sit here. The sun is hurting you." The women hesitated, but finally followed. Elias removed the blanket from his horse's saddle and placed it on the shaded ground. The younger woman helped the older one sit down. Elias took a small cloth from his bag, soaked it with water, and placed it gently on the older woman's hand, offering it to her. She pressed it against her face with relief. He could see how tired she truly was. The younger woman's eyes softened as she realized he was helping without expecting anything in return. For a few minutes, none of them spoke. The desert was quiet, except for a soft breeze and the distant cry of a hawk. Elias checked his horse, gave it some water, and then returned to the women. "You should rest before you walk again," he said. The younger woman nodded and pointed toward the hills again, as if saying they must reach their home. Elias understood, but he also knew the heat was too strong for them to continue immediately. So he stayed near them, giving them time to recover. After a while, the older woman reached into her small bundle and took out a carved stone, smooth and dark, with a symbol etched into it. She held it out to Elias. He hesitated, confused, but she insisted by pushing it gently toward his hand. Elias accepted it with care. The stone felt warm from her touch. He didn't know what the symbol meant, but he bowed his head in respect. The younger woman whispered something in Apache, and Elias didn't understand the words, but he understood the feeling. It was gratitude. He led them back to the open desert, but stopped before going too far toward their side. He knew stepping into Apache land without permission could bring trouble. He simply pointed toward the safest path and said, "Walk slow. Rest when you need to. The sun will soften soon." The older woman raised her hand toward him in a gesture of peace. The younger one smiled, a small, tired smile that still carried warmth. They walked away, their figures slowly becoming smaller as the desert swallowed their steps. Elias stood there until he could no longer see them. He didn't feel like he had done anything special. In his heart, offering water in the desert was simply the right thing to do. He turned his horse toward home and rode away, thinking the day would end quietly like all others. But something unseen had happened. Far away, hidden behind a tall rock, a silent observer, a young Apache scout, had watched everything. He saw Elias give water. He saw kindness instead of fear. He saw respect instead of judgment. And that scout carried the story back to the Apache leaders. By nightfall, whispers traveled through the hills. A settler had offered water to 2 Apache women without hesitation or fear. A small act, but in a time of rising tension, it shone brightly like a cool spring in a dry desert. Elias did not know any of this. He slept peacefully that night, believing the day had ended quietly. He had no idea that the simple act of offering water would begin the first gentle shift in a conflict that many believed could never be softened. He didn't know that his kindness had carried farther than the desert wind itself. And he had no idea that the next days would bring Apache riders to his land, not for anger, not for blame, but for something more surprising and more powerful, something that would change the desert's story forever. The next 2 days passed slowly for Elias Ward. He woke early, fed his cattle, repaired a broken fence, and checked the water troughs the same way he always did. Nothing unusual happened, but there was a quiet feeling in the air, something he couldn't fully explain. The desert seemed too still, like it was holding its breath, waiting for something to change. Other settlers felt it too. Some had seen Apache riders on distant hills and whispered nervously in the trading post. Fear spread quickly in towns like theirs. Men sharpened tools they rarely used. Women brought children indoors early, and ranchers rode with an extra look over their shoulder. Many believed a major conflict was coming. Elias heard all these rumors, but he didn't add to them. He simply went about his tasks, hoping the land would stay calm. One afternoon, while Elias was fixing the hinges on his barn door, his horse lifted its head and gave a warning snort. Elias paused and listened carefully. A faint vibration carried through the ground, the slow, steady rhythm of horses approaching. Not one or two, but many. He wiped his hands on his trousers, stepped outside the barn, and shaded his eyes from the bright sun. Dust rose in the distance, hovering like a cloud just above the desert floor. As the figures came closer, he recognized the outline of several riders. Their posture, their paint, and their horses all told him they were Apache. Elias felt no fear, only surprise. He stood still as the group slowed down a few yards from his porch. There were about 8 riders. They stopped in a straight line, quiet and calm, not threatening. Their leader, a strong man with steady eyes and silver beads in his long, dark hair, stepped forward. Elias knew his face. Some settlers whispered about him in cautious tones. This was Chief Tohani, known for his wisdom during difficult times. He was respected among both his people and some settlers who believed in peaceful understanding. Elias never imagined he would stand face to face with him. Tohani dismounted slowly, showing no sign of aggression. Behind him, 2 riders also climbed down. Elias's heart surprised him with a gentle jump when he recognized them, the same 2 Apache women he had helped in the desert. The younger woman smiled softly at him, and the older woman lifted her hand slightly in quiet greeting. For a moment, everything was still. Elias took a step forward, unsure what to say. The chief spoke before he could open his mouth. "We come with calm words," Tohani said. His voice was strong but respectful. "You helped 2 of our own when the sun showed no mercy." Elias blinked, unsure how they knew. "I only gave them water," he answered softly. "To offer water in the desert is to offer life," Tohani said. "Many would have turned away. You did not." The younger woman stepped closer, placing her hand over her heart. She pointed to the older woman beside her. "My mother was weak," she said gently. "Your water brought her strength back. She would not have reached home without it." The older woman nodded, confirming her daughter's words. Elias felt a warmth settle inside him, not pride, just quiet relief that they were safe. Chief Tohani took another step forward. His expression remained calm, firm, and thoughtful. He reached into a small pouch on his belt and took out a small carved token made of wood and stone. Elias had seen objects like this before, but never received one. The chief placed it carefully on the ground between them. "This is a sign of safe passage," Tohani said. "A promise. No Apache rider, no family, no warrior will harm your land." Elias's eyes widened slightly. It was one of the most respected assurances in Apache tradition, not given lightly. He didn't move to pick it up yet, not out of disrespect, but because he wanted to understand clearly. "You owe me nothing," Elias said quietly. "I didn't help for reward." "We know," the chief replied. "That is why this token is given. Kindness without reason carries great weight." Behind Tohani, the other riders remained completely silent, watching with calm expressions. The desert wind gently tugged at the horses' manes, and a hawk circled high above them, as if the land itself was trying to listen. Elias finally bent down and picked up the token. It felt smooth and warm in his hand, a symbol of trust that could not be measured in money or goods. When he stood up again, the chief gave a small bow of gratitude. At that moment, several settlers from nearby ranches appeared. They had noticed the riders and rushed over, worried about an attack. They stopped at a distance, ready to shout warnings or prepare for trouble, but the scene they saw left them frozen in surprise. There was no anger, no tension, only calm gestures and respectful words. One settler, a middle-aged man named Brewer, finally rode closer. "Elias," he called out cautiously, Are you all right? Elias nodded. Everything is peaceful, he said simply. Chief Tohani looked toward the settlers and raised his hand in greeting. His voice carried across the silent stretch of land. No trouble comes today. A man among you has shown friendship. We came to honor that. The settlers exchanged confused glances. They had expected danger, not gratitude. Elias explained quietly to them what had happened. The two women he had met, the water he had shared, the stone given in return. The settlers listened, disbelief turning slowly into a sense of respect. Then something unexpected happened. The younger Apache woman stepped forward again. She lifted a small bundle from her saddle and offered it to Elias. When he opened it, he found herbs, dried fruit, and a woven cloth. She had prepared it as a thank you gift, simple but heartfelt. Elias accepted it with both hands. "Thank you," he said softly. The older woman touched her heart again and murmured a short phrase. Elias didn't understand the words, but he felt their meaning. Gratitude needed no translation. After a long, respectful moment, the Apache riders mounted their horses again. Chief Tohani looked at Elias one more time and said, "The desert remembers kindness. Our people remember it too." Elias bowed his head slightly. "I wish peace for your people," he said. "And peace for yours," Tohani replied. The riders turned their horses and moved away in a calm, steady line, the dust rising behind them as they crossed the open land. Elias and the settlers watched them until they disappeared behind a distant ridge. When the riders were gone, Brewer rode up to Elias with disbelief still written across his face. "I don't know what you did," he said, shaking his head slowly, "but you may have just stopped the trouble everyone feared." Elias didn't claim anything heroic. He only said, "Sometimes people just need a little kindness." Over the next few weeks, something remarkable happened. The land around the ranch grew quieter. The settlers no longer saw Apache riders near their fences in a tense, guarded way. Instead, sometimes they saw families gathering wood or searching for herbs calmly, without hiding or rushing. A few brave settlers even approached them with small offerings, flour, fresh bread, or blankets. The Apache families offered herbs, handmade tools, and quiet greetings in return. A slow bridge built itself between the two groups, not through force or words of authority, but through simple human gestures, one at a time. Elias became a quiet link between both sides. He never stood in the center of attention, but people knew he was the reason the tension softened. The Apache families treated him with quiet respect whenever they passed near his land. Settlers trusted his judgment and often asked him if things felt safe. He always answered honestly. "The land feels calmer," he would say, and he was right. Children began playing outside longer again. Women hung laundry without fear of sudden alarm. Men rode their horses without checking over their shoulders every few minutes. The desert war that many feared never fully rose. People looked back on that time later and realized that one simple act had changed the direction of everything. A man sharing water in a burning hot afternoon had become the first quiet step toward peace. Elias kept the wooden token on a small shelf inside his cabin. He didn't display it with pride or show it off. He simply kept it as a reminder that even the smallest gesture, a drink of water, a moment of empathy, a step toward someone instead of away, could shift the course of lives. Whenever someone asked him about that day, he always answered humbly, "I just saw people who needed help." But everyone who knew the story understood it was much more. It was the moment a poor rancher gave water to two tired women, and the desert, hot, harsh, and unforgiving, carried that kindness farther than anyone expected. And that simple act changed everything.